for your office to ask for you to be here at this chamber. It means a lot to us.
Oh, well.
We've got great history. So do you want to go around the room so you know everybody?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay, so anyway, who's this?
Yeah.
I just want to qualify everything by saying, as the older brother, everything that you like about him, I taught him. Everything you don't, it's my dad, God rest his soul.
That's right.
You.
Oh, yeah, you did that.
I've known Mike since he was a singer.
Okay, I knew that was coming.
Okay,
Where's the videos locked up?
Yeah, that's
we
right.
have Ann here. She has to be at a committee meeting, but she wanted to come by. But go ahead.
State Rep Ann Bolin, it's good to have you back home.
Thank you. Thanks, Ann.
And,
Good to see you.
Good to see so many people here to hear what you have to say.
I'm Michelle Token. I'm the Division Director here at the Greater Brighton Area Chamber of Commerce.
I'm Dave Domas. I'm the chairman of the Livingston County Board of Commissioners. And we're expecting my partner in crime, Roger Deaton, any minute now. He's delayed slightly, but he's forward to being here. Good to see you, Mike.
It's great to see you.
Take care.
Yeah.
Welcome aboard.
Thanks.
Dominic Restuccia with Griffith Realty.
Yeah. It's good to see you.
Scott Griffith.
Are you sure?
Sometimes with Griffith Realty. Sometimes.
Rob Johnson, Wade Media Group.
Nice to see you.
Julia Peeler, Media Group.
And Julian.
Julian Williams with the Chamber. I'm Director of Business Development.
Kate Lawrence, retired.
Love that.
Loving it.
Love that.
A board member on the Greater Brighton Area Chamber of Commerce and other boards.
Nice.
And great to see you.
That's
again.
great to see you. Congratulations on retirement. And you'll fail that too, right? You'll fail
really
retirement?
like it.
Yeah,
I
you're going to be
set my alarm for 7 this morning.
I love that. That's funny.
David Blades, it's been a minute, and it's good to see you
Yeah.
again. Hungry Howie's.
Yeah.
Bill Anderson, Brighton Chamber Membership Development.
Bill works for the chamber now.
It's what he was telling me. This is
Yeah.
great. That's
Yeah.
look at the scruff
Yeah,
too. I love
I'm
that.
semi-retired.
He's
so-
a recovering banker.
Yeah.
Every banker is a recovering.
Welcome back.
Thank you, my friend.
I'm Julie Daraban, North Star Bank Trust Administration in Ann Arbor, and on the board of the Lyon Area Chamber.
I'm Hank Fopel, former state rep from the Northwest area.
Oh, wonderful. Good to see you.
Michael Sage with DT Energy.
I'm Mark Smith, recovering engineer, and working here at the Chamber in membership development.
Love it. What kind of engineering?
Automotive.
Automotive.
Tina Jackson, Sales Corporation.
Captain Dan Kennel from UTEC in Ann Arbor.
And I'm Tom Harrison with UTEC in Ann Arbor.
Wonderful. Well, gosh, first of all, thank you very much for lowering your standards and coming out, go from retirement to come out this morning. You know, when we were coming back to Michigan, I had some things over in Grand Rapids, and I couldn't think of a better place to stop in and check in than the place that we called home for a lot of years. Matter of fact, that was the first time I ever learned the term voluntold. We actually used to put up, believe this, the Rogers boys put up the decorations in this town at one point because they couldn't find anyone to do it. And I think they may have been a little off and not quite exactly right, but and we found out about that the day before when apparently some contracts or whatever got canceled, and my mom rounded up as many of us that were in the house that day and said, "Guess what? You're putting up Christmas decorations."
Guess what you're doing?
Yeah, exactly. Oh gosh, a lot of great memories, and thanks, Pam, for doing such a great job with the chamber and keeping the spirit of this place alive, which is really important. I just thought, again, I would come in. It's always great to see old friends. If you're going to go anywhere, go see the old friends first, right? And I just thought I'd catch up a little bit on what I'm doing and kinds of things we're thinking and why we find ourselves in this very odd place in our life. So my wife Christy and I are, we have doing great. She's got a small business that she does, and I've been in the tech space for 8 years. I'm the chairman of the board of a company called MITRE Corporations. It's a federally funded research and development corporation, $2 billion in revenue. It has about 10,000 engineers. That's why I asked, of every stripe you can imagine. And the federal government throws really hard problems at this, and it's really kind of a gem in the national security space. for the work that it does. Think of things like, gosh, we think nuclear command and control needs to be updated. They throw it at this company. And so it doesn't compete with the private sector, but it gets the science to a point where we can hand it to the private sector. So really big, hard problem. Space is another big, hard problem. How do you secure a satellite? They would come to MITRE Corporation and say, we can't figure this out. Tell us how you would do it. Bring all these engineers in, and they do the big think, as we call it, on how to solve these problems. Great. On a few cybersecurity boards, I'm on a quantum computing board, which I do think it will happen in our lifetime, believe me. Quantum computing, which is going to just, I think, exponentially make logistics more easy in the country from a commercial aspect. And also the danger of, guess what, if the Chinese get it first, we're in trouble. It could crack nuclear codes. Nothing to worry about. Go back to sleep. It's good. Oh, come on, people, lighten up. I told Japan we should have done this over alcohol. We should have had this. I'm a lot more entertaining if that's the case.
Pull it out if you'd like downstairs.
Oh, good. It's still the same chamber. I love it. And so we were busy going about our lives and doing our thing. And the cybersecurity was a passion of mine. And I always believed that we needed to keep one step ahead of the bad guys. And cybersecurity was a way for me to both get into business and try to do that. So we've been doing that and having a great time. About 18 months ago, like most of you, I think you woke up one morning and said, man, something just doesn't seem right about America and our politics and our direction. It just didn't feel right. And I'm not talking about the usual, Republican versus Democrat argument on any particular issue. Something just doesn't feel right in the country. And so we thought about it and said, why don't we start an organization to continue to remind the next generation that, hey, listen, you can still make it in America. You can start out as selling a few pizzas a week and sell a bunch more per week if you just work at it and work hard. The kinds of things that I certainly learned watching many of you over the years develop and build your businesses. And that spirit seems to be a little bit waning in this next generation. They just don't sense this notion that you can do anything you want in this country. It doesn't matter who you are or where you came from, what your zip code is, what you look like. You can still make it in America. Matter of fact, if you want to really get the best picture of that, get an Uber driver in any big city in America. And I've gotten Uber drivers in about every big city in America. They tend to be recent immigrants, most of them working the odd shifts, who have these amazing stories to tell you about their journey here and how they're making it in America and how they can't understand why anyone in the world wouldn't want to be right here in the United States. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I think Uber drivers should probably tell America's story. I think let's agree that we're going to do that, right? I mean, it's really quite an amazing thing. And so we said, let's do something. Let's start telling stories of Americans who have made it, came from nowhere. Matter of fact, my partner in a small business started out as a sharecropper in North Carolina. And he thought that was his life. He was going to be on that farm for the rest of his life, barely making it, because that's the way his dad was grown up. And his dad just kept pushing him and pushing him and pushing him. Finally, he goes to school. Then he started his own. It's basically a venture capital firm, and it just took off. Right? He's just doing phenomenally well. And as he says, as a black American, there's no place in the world could this happen, but here in the United States. So we said, let's go start telling those stories. We hired a group out of Iowa. Honestly, there was nothing to that other than it came from a reference about, hey, we needed somebody who could help craft the message for us digitally and make it look appealing enough to every generation, right? Which is every generation looks at things a little differently. So we got with them and we were working through it. And I had a donor to it's a 501c4, and it's called leadamerica.org. If you haven't been there, please do, leadamerica.org. And the guy said, I really want to support that, but I really need you to think about taking this message into 2024. More of a limited government, hopeful, aspirational, try to bring people together. Could we get our hands off of each other's throats long enough to actually do something for the country? I don't know. Sounds a little Pollyannish. So we said, well, okay. I mean, that's the message we were working on. And Chrissy and I went out to Iowa. We spent about a week. And they set us up with some of the most grisly, battle-hardened campaign people who have been doing presidential politics in Iowa for 40 years, 30 years, 20 years. And he said, if you get one of them to say, you're not nuts for even thinking about this, then maybe you have something. And I said, well, fair enough. And by the way, we were not thinking about this. This wasn't on our dance card. So we went out, came back from the last, in the week, it was a Friday, and he calls and says, well, you didn't get one. I went, okay. And he said, you got 4. And really what it was just a more positive message about who we are and where we're going. That's all. And it's different in the sense that we have got to stop trying to kill each other politically. Because there's so much at stake. And I'm just going to cover a few of those, and then I really do want to have this as a conversation. But if you look at where China is in the world, and so as chairman of MITRE, I started a group, it's called the Strategic Competition Center at MITRE Corporation. And that sole purpose is designed to see what are the Chinese doing to try to get ahead of us both in technology, militarily, intelligence-wise. What are they doing? Space, a big part of that. And so I get to see every day what's happening, what the Chinese are doing and how they're doing it. And I candidly think that our politics has gotten so small, we're forgetting to start to how we're preparing ourselves as Americans to compete with them. Give you a great idea. Our government is trying to ban gas stoves. You know, their government is pushing hypersonic missiles to take out the U.S. Navy. Their Navy just surpassed the size of the United States Navy, right? And they told us they were going to do this for 20 years. They have never have once said we're going to sneak up on the Americans. They have told us every year we want a Navy that competes with the U.S. Navy head to head. And I have a son, nephew in the United States Navy now, serving out in San Diego. You start talking to those folks about what the threat to the U.S. Navy is from the Chinese Navy, and they get a little bead of sweat on their head. They are a real competitor against the United States Navy. You start thinking about all the things that we're not getting right. They're teaching their 8th graders quantum mechanics. Think of that. In 8th grade, they get quantum mechanics classes. Last year in the United States, we graduated half of our high school seniors could not read past the 6th grade. Half. Think of that for a minute, right? They graduate twice as many PhDs in science, technology, engineering, and math than we do. And they've done that for the last 2 years, and they think that number's going to get higher in the next few years. They're telling us that technology is the future, and that's why they want to be data dominant, why people talk about why are we worried about TikTok, right? Because it's a data collection platform on your kids, on your friends who use it. I can't get my daughter off of it. I swear to God. But we know exactly what they're doing. And they use that data for their own purposes in their own game, right? And that's why there's this argument about, are their algorithms better than US designed algorithms, right, for machine learning and other things? They're only better because they have 900 million people, plus all the TikTok users, plus Alibaba, all of those in a data set. And the US government doesn't do that, and private sector can't accumulate that much data, right? And they use that data and they run those algorithms. And the more data your algorithm touches, the smarter that algorithm gets, right? Just common sense. And so they're kind of moving out smartly. They want to take the US currency reserve off the shelf. They are trying to create their own US currency reserve. And I tell you all this because, and by the way, what that would mean is our standard of life is going down. So, money, easy money, solid dollar. Other countries invest in us because they can trust that they're going to get paid back on the currency reserve, right? So that's why we get all this foreign currency pouring into the United States. It's actually a good thing for us, right? When that goes away, it means our borrowing costs go through the roof. If you think about the kind of the big ticket items that we don't talk about because politically we just decide that we're going to kill each other, Medicare is going to be in cash deficit in 2028. Think of that. Yay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right about when you're eligible, right? And what that means is they're going to have to fill that hole from tax money that comes in for other things. It's the only way to do it without any changes. And I'm not talking about cuts. People who talk about cuts aren't looking at modernization. It's a whole nother story. But when you look at that, that means the 3 top budget items going into this next decade will be Social Security, Medicare, and interest on the national debt. The 3 top line items. And everything else keeps getting squeezed out because there's just not enough money to cover it. And you think, okay, well, China is investing in space. They're spending $10 billion of the state's money, the Chinese Communist Party, investing in 6G. And 6G is a data-driven, sensor-driven networks, right, that they're going to use for modern manufacturing and other things. And the U.S. government has spent, we can't find anywhere we've spent anything. Private sector's trying to fill the hole as it should, but it's not anywhere close to $10 billion, right? And they want to control the standards. So I tell you all this to say, okay, we have to be sober about what our problem set is. I just don't think our politics today is where it needs to be to handle this kind of thing. We're vindictive. We go after, what's the pet peeve of the week? I call it sugar high politics. If I can take a slap shot and hit you in the forehead, that's a good day, right? And I'm going to get like 8,000 hits on Twitter or whatever. I'm going to have Twitter followers up the, well, I can't say up the, can I? I don't know. Okay, just checking in. Yeah, just checking in. So all is lost, right? No, not even close. And if you look at, has America ever been in a rough shot before? In our lifetimes, it has. Everybody in this room, except for the younger folks, and me, of course. You guys are bad this today, aren't you? That's fun. You think of the 60s, we had an assassination of a president, assassination of an attorney general, we had an assassination of just a very prominent civil rights leader. We slid into race riots. We had the most unpopular war ever, and we had never experienced that in America, or people in the streets protesting about a war that the United States was engaged in. I mean, I don't know about the rest of you. It felt like this whole place was coming to a screeching halt. Then we went into the 70s, which wasn't much better, huge interest rates. And if you think about what came out of that, and I happen to be a Ronald Reagan fan, but he came in and said, no, we can do this. Everybody calm down, we can do this, right? You like his policies, don't like his policies. One thing he did is start uniting America around, hey, don't forget who we are and what we offer the world and how we can get this done. And I think we can do the same thing now, but it is going to take some hard conversations, and it's going to take a little bit different. We're going to have these conversations differently. If you look at how divided we are politically in this country, it's unbelievable. And listen, I think we spend way too much time in this country segregating ourselves. The government asks you to, who are you, and what's your pronoun, and everybody stand over here, right? Everybody get away from each other because we're different. Came from a different place. We look different. I think that's just horrifically dangerous for the future of this country. And we just need to stand up. I'm not talking about not being for tolerance. I think tolerance is very important. But you can't take it that step further and say everybody is different. By the way, you're the problem of all my problems and my past problems, and expect us to be a great country. We won't do it. So we need to start coming back together. I would argue stop all the government requirements that tell us that we're, where we're from and color of our skin, and then they segregate it, and then they do benefits according to that. We're just all the wrong incentives about a united front for the country of the United States. We just do it wrong. And so if you could start having those conversations in a way that brought people back together, listen, I think this is certainly the same country that has innovated its way out of every problem. And the one difference that I think didn't feel right, certainly to me and Christy and my family as well, is that we used to be bigger than our problems. America was always bigger than our problems. And today it just doesn't feel that way. Doesn't mean we can't be, doesn't mean we won't be. It just means it doesn't feel that way, right? And that wild pendulum that's just happened to swing in the last two elections, right? We're all in on this, now we're all in on this, right? And it's not going to work, and it's not sustainable. So what do? Listen, I think we need a public service call, and I think there's a way to do it where everybody doesn't have to go in the military. Matter of fact, one of the other impetus of my concern, we haven't been meeting our military recruiting numbers. We've never been below 60% of families in America saying, I'd be proud if my child were in the military. What that number was last year? 39. And you wonder why people aren't standing up, putting your arm up. If you don't have families saying this is good for the country, it's not going to happen, right? Your kids aren't, and they're at that age where they're looking for a little guidance and a little push, and that's unsustainable for us as a country, candidly. What they did last year in the government, only the government could do this, is say, well, we missed our quotas, but we're going to change what our quotas were. I say quotas, recruiting numbers, Yeah, did you see that? They just changed it. Well, we didn't really need that many.
They didn't disappear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fog it up.
Yeah.
That's what they did when I went in the Army. They said, oh my God, he's breathing, put him in. So I tell you all that, I do think there's things, a public service, I think we can reclaim this reading problem that we have in the country. There was a study done that showed that if we could get 12th graders and young adults at reading level, like meaning 12th grade or better, it would add about $1.7 trillion to the U.S. economy. You just think, well, how can that be? Because they can all upskill, right? You learn to read to the 3rd grade, and then you read to learn for the rest of your life. And if you're not caught up, the number is staggering. If you can't read at the 4th grade level, you have a 70% chance of living on welfare or in prison. 70% chance. There was just a study that showed 53 schools in Illinois did not have one student, not 1%, not one student proficient in math and reading at grade level. Not one. This just happened. This wasn't 100 years ago or 50 years ago. This was last year, right? And I tell you these bad things because I think we have to be sober about our approach. The other part that I think we have to work on, we have a mental health crisis in America, and I think we are sticking our head in the sand if we don't see it. 1 in 10 teenage girls in 2021 attempted suicide. 1 in 10. That's a crisis, right? 30% contemplated it of teenage girls in 2021. That is a crisis. And what are we talking about? Well, look at our politics today. Are we ready to deal with this? I don't think we are. I don't even think we're talking about it. We're going to find the one sugar high thing that gets us to the next election. I'm pretty excited about the prospects of what we can do, even on Medicare. I mean, we have, I won't bore you with all the details, but there's a plan to do this in a way that doesn't cut benefits, but actually makes Medicare more efficient. Today in the government, if you send $10 to the U.S. government, you think you get $10 worth of service coming out the other end? Anybody believe that? I don't either.
Not in my life.
Matter of fact, yeah, exactly. Now the average salary of a federal employee inside the Beltway went over $100,000. That means the average UAW worker in the state of Michigan, who makes about $54,000, pays about $5,000 in federal taxes. Think of that. It takes at least 10 of them to pay for one employee inside the Beltway. Anybody think that's a good ratio? Right? Something's wrong with that. And it's because has never been modernized. We don't need, you go back, you can go through these offices that are talking about still getting fax machines. I wish I were kidding. We modernized the government. We have all of the above energy strategies. Stop fighting about it has to be, I'm more green than you, and say if you want to get to a path that has less carbon in the environment, great. But here's a path to do that. You can't do it overnight. It's dangerous to do it overnight, and you're putting ourselves at risk for being dependent on adversaries that want to do us harm, right? We can do both, but we have to have a conversation about doing both, right? I think we can do this. Again, on service, I would have a reading corps. Imagine if people showed up, there was great, and by the way, this is not a government-run reading corps, it's a not-for-profit reading corps. We have one here in Michigan. If you're not familiar with it, look it up, it's phenomenal. It's called Beyond Basics. And they go and they do these intense assessments. They were finding students, by the way, through these assessments. And sometimes I think the school districts fudge these assessments. I know you're shocked by that. They went in and do their individual assessments in Detroit schools. They were finding students who are juniors and seniors, juniors and seniors reading at the 1st grade level. So what kind of education do you think they got between 1st grade and 12th grade or junior? Not very good. And we wonder why we're having this problem, right? And so they can go back and they can reclaim those students to grade level within 6 to 14 weeks. It's pretty intense. But it can happen. You need the same tutor the whole time. That's why this is a little more intense. You can't have people coming in every day to do it. You have to have the same person. That's why I would create, through a group like that, a nonprofit. Listen, we'll help you pay for it, federal government, but we're not going to run it. Because if we run it, the federal government, guess what? It's not going to be run very well. It'll get screwed up in a hurry. But let them do what they're doing. They can scale it. Same with doctors. You want money off of your student loan? I'm all for it. We have these federally health clinics in poor communities. Go serve there for a year as a doctor. We'll help you out. We need nurses desperately everywhere. That's great. You want to go to a rural area that doesn't have nurses right now? There's places that don't have OBGYN doctors and nurses in the country in 2023 where they don't have them in their whole county. No, you have nowhere to go as a woman who has these needs. Great. You want a little help on your education? I'm for that, but you have to give something up. You have to actually go and serve in these rural communities to provide health care for these folks. And by the way, it's a very efficient way to deliver health care. And Medicare, we can go down this list. We think the money that we can cut out, when I was chairman of the Intelligence Committee, $78 billion. At the height of the war, we didn't do press conferences. We cut $6 billion out of me. I was working with my Democrat partner at the time, a guy named Dutch Ruppersberger, wonderful guy. Still a friend of mine, by the way. He's still in Congress. We went in and said, we think we can find ways, because we were pouring money. Remember when right after 9/11, if you said the word terrorist, you got millions. Oh, millions here. They shoved it at these organizations. Said, go do something good with it. So we realized, hey, this is not efficient. They hadn't had a budget in 6 years. And I'm like, when I became chairman, I said, that's going to end, right? You can't spend $78 billion without having a budget. Oh my God. Well, we found about $6 billion. We probably could have done more. In that process, my argument is, let's just go back through the government. We're going to do the same thing. We merged IT systems. Wasn't there an IT guy here? Were you in IT? No. Yeah. We merged IT systems and saved a bunch of money. We made them compatible and interoperable. We saved on education, the little things, but think how much money that added up to. If we could find $6 billion in the intelligence community at the height of the Iraq War, you're telling me we can't find money in every department in Washington, D.C.? And by the way, you don't even have to say the word cut. You just make it more efficient. Don't you want a more efficient government? I want as much of that $10 that we're sending, and we all wish we were sending $10. I want as much of that $10 working toward a problem, whatever it is, whatever we decide that is in the government together, whatever that is, right? Maybe it's research and development, maybe it's the military, maybe it's modernization of space. All of those things are really possible. And so what we did is we went around the country. We've been in New Hampshire and South Carolina, and oddly enough, we've been getting a tremendous response. I mean, people who are hardened political activists. So the people who show up and hear you in a room this size, by the way, in New Hampshire, they're hardened political activists. It's really early. They don't know who in the heck I am. But they'll come out and listen. And the reaction has been pretty amazing. I think America is ready to believe in herself again. I believe it. But it can't be, listen, I'm a little old-fashioned this way, but if you're going to love your country, you have to love your countrymen as well, right? We can't leave half or a quarter or a third because of our political differences. We can't do it. They disagree. We should have these debates. We should have arguments. It happens. That's politics. It's good. What do they say? A rising kite only rises against the wind, right? You got to have that friction to make things go. Get it. But we don't have to do it in a way where we choke them and throw them in the ditch and then celebrate with a selfie, right? Okay, thanks. I just tried that line out. Is that working? All right, thanks. What do you?
Somebody got that?
At any rate, I'd love to hear what you're thinking, where you're at, where we're going. Do you think America's ready for this or not?
What's the status or strength, success of Space Force?
Yeah, so candidly, I wasn't for creating a Space Force. There was a space command under the Air Force. Sometimes when you move inboxes, what you've really done is, move inboxes. And their argument was that they wanted to focus on it. That's a leadership thing, not a department thing. So but it's here and it's there. The reason that there was concern is that the Chinese, the Russians primarily, have militarized space. So think about 20 years, or not even longer than that, since the 60s, we dominated space. Nobody was even a near-peer competitor in space. And why is that important for us? Smart ships, smart bombs, smart soldiers, sailors, Marines, right? On the battlefield, we outperform, A, because our people are amazing, but B, we also provide them a technology package that allows you to outdo your enemy in very short order, right? That's why the power of the U.S. military is such a thing. Well, it's all space enabled. I mean, I always used to joke that, if the Chinese had their way and they took out our military satellites for GPS, think about what GPS does for you in your daily life. Everything from, it allows you to use this to make a withdrawal from your bank account because it knows where you are, and it verifies who you are. I mean, it's not always perfect, but that GPS system does a lot. I argue you take out GPS, which is what the Chinese goal is, right? Not to do it, but to be prepared to do it. I mean, my argument, this may be the biggest national security threat to the country. Think of 23 million Americans who don't have their Starbucks app. No caffeination. Holy mackerel. Holy cow, we're in trouble, right? But you think about it, that's really what they're trying to do. They saw it as a strength, and they want to make it a weakness for us. And so they're militarizing space. They can take them.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
I thought I had it on. Be quiet.
I love it. Tell them we said hello.
Thank goodness.
Potential spam.
Thank goodness for the GPS so an advertiser can find her.
We can. Yeah.
I thought I'd just chime in for a half a second here, but a good friend of ours, of mine, she lost her brother in the last quarter of last year, passed away at a rather early age. So they were over cleaning out the house, this is over in Weberville, and discovered this letter that came from Congressman Mike Rogers.
It was on the bottom of a bird cage. I know.
Well, they still had to clean. So they read this letter and called me right away and said, "You're not gonna believe this. This letter came from your brother, and it started out in 2008, he forewarned all of his colleagues, and then the incoming president and vice president, of the dangers of China." And it was a page and a half. And he forewarned everybody and essentially was mocked by those people in 2008. So when everything went down more recently, I called him up after, COVID and stuff like that, and I said, "I'll say it for you. I told you so." I mean, it was dead on, and this was a letter. So we actually, in honor of her brother, we got together over the holidays, and he re-signed the letter for these folks. And they're just, I probably have it framed someplace, but.
Still on the bottom of the. We use really good paper.
No, they have dogs and cats and stuff, so it's okay. But so this is not new to my baby brother. He hates when I say that, by the way. It is something that he has been passionate about for a long time. And when we both decided not to rerun at this higher level, we just looked and said, we're tired, it's fatiguing because people are not getting the job done. We need to do something. And when he called and said he's looking at other things now, I went, holy smokes, he must be really ticked off. And he is, so.
Well, part of my thing on that whole thing, and listen, I had a lot of great supporters in here, was that, sometimes, I never planned to be a 20 or 30 year political guy. I just didn't. I wanted to go and do things I was passionate about, see if I could get something done, and then give it to somebody else, to let somebody else try it. Because I think that innovation is really important. And you could kind of see over the horizon the nastiness coming up over the horizon. I thought, this is nuts. Is this our highest and best use to do this? And I still think it's really important work, and it's we have great folks who continue to serve, which is phenomenal. We have Ann scooted out, and that's great. But I tell you, we're going to have to shake ourselves out of this and start focusing on the things we know how to fix to get ready.
How do you wake up the voter? I mean, because you have only one shot at this, and that's if you can be elected.
Yeah.
Or folks who have similar thoughts like yourself can be elected. You said one thing to me that really grabbed me, and that was the problems, don't they feel a little bit bigger than what the government can handle? Do you know that seems to be trickling down, even to my business, right? The problems that we're having might even be bigger than what I can actually corral. I mean, we're working hard to do so. How do you deliver the message to this fragmented population now? I mean, I'm not a very old soul, but I've been around long enough to know that unless somebody falls down completely, they don't listen.
Yeah.
So how far do we have to I mean, how do we do it? I mean, because we're all here for a reason. You know, we love to shake, like you say, shake the bush.
Yeah.
But how,
I think it's,
that message you just delivered to us in 15 minutes would never be distributed amongst the masses. How do you get that message distributed to the masses?
yeah. Well, it's one of the reasons I
'Cause
think.
you shook me up.
Oh, well, you know, it's one of the reasons we decided to kind of take this. This is, you know, to say this is a long shot is maybe the greatest understatement of all time, right? But the same reason we started Lead America, and my wife and I, is to try to, could we change the narrative? Could we get people focused on solutions rather than just problem? And not all problems. I mean, some of the problems we make, the biggest problem in the world is a symptom of other things going wrong, right? And what we got to do is start getting at those symptoms, right? And you'll see it with every big event that happens. I don't care where it is. Everybody focuses, like 5-year-olds playing soccer. Everybody's around the ball, and this is it, and this is the only thing that matters for the next 48 hours, and I'm going to tweet about it, and I'm going to be angry, and it's going to be that sugar high, and I'm going to slap somebody, and that's going to be great, and again, in the ditch, selfie. All right, that's the second time I used it. I'm just trying it again. Just want to see if it works. So we said, could we do it? And one of the ways I thought the only way to do it, this maybe, is to at least try to get into the draft of the states that are going to make a really important decision coming up for 2024, right? That will get national attention, that will get lots and lots and lots of press drifting through. And it's sometimes it's small, you know, as my mom used to say, you eat an elephant, you know, one bite at a time. And so show up. And what we've been doing is showing up. I mean, in the next 100 days, I'm probably going to spend 60 days. And I'm not a declared candidate, by the way. That's not how all this works. Unless you're independently wealthy when you go in. And Bill says he's not, so damn. Is show up. And I'll give you one example. So I went to this place in Iowa, and I gave this version of this speech, really. You know, I like to highlight what the problems are. Like, here's what China's trying to do. Here's our problems. Here's how we move to the next place. Here's how we get better. Here's how we heal ourselves, right? We've looked in the mirror and seen the enemy, as that old saying goes. And it was literally half the room had Trump MAGA hats on, right? And I don't talk bad about Trump. You know, I wasn't necessarily his biggest fan, but I don't talk bad about him. I just do what I just did, basically. And I thought, well, I'm either going to get, you know, pancake thrown at me. I better check my exits, make sure I can get the heck out of here. And I just gave that speech. And, you know, the line queues up afterward. And it's this kind of conservative club in Iowa, breakfast kind of thing. And 6 of them were in line. And I thought, oh, boy, here it goes. Welcome. And one after the other said, you know, I really love this message. Would you come out and give this message to my group? You know, some groups had 10 people in them, some groups had 20 people in them. And by the way, these places, it's not the national, you know, you see all this big national talk and everybody's, you know, on panels and they're all talking about this percentage and that. I don't do any of that, obviously. I show up. And that's how you kind of get people in a state like that. Think of this, 40,000 people will determine who wins New Hampshire. That's less than the congressional seat I held here. Right? And so it's very retail oriented. And so is Iowa. South Carolina is a little different, but it's very retail oriented. I had all 6 of those. We're going back to Iowa to talk to all 6 of their groups. And these are folks who came in loaded to the bear with the buttons and the hats and the whole 9 yards. I'm starting to believe people might believe that, hey, we got to do this better than we're doing it. I could be wrong. I said maybe it's a little Pollyannish, but I think that's how you start. And if it catches fire, you know, maybe we can change the narrative. Maybe we can get, and I always believed in a presidential race, if you watch, the candidate that's normally the lead, people start drifting to those positions in a primary. My argument is let's try this and see if people start drifting to better conversations about how we fix our problem.
Well, it's smoldering amongst sensible people.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, folks, for coming and putting up with him. I've heard him over and over again. Just saying. But anyways, I actually have another meeting to solve an issue and grow Genoa Township, so I got to run.
Go grow, go grow.
You
See you, Bill.
You know, somebody on the left that could stand up with you and say, we're gonna fix the structural issues, and we'll let the social issues kind of take care of themselves afterwards, that you could show something that's different, you'd have almost a team approach.
Yeah, it's not in American politics today. I mean, if you did that and you're on the left, you get killed. You'll get just slaughtered. I mean, candidly,
Killed on the right too, won't you?
yeah, a little bit. It's going to happen. I expect that I will have some unflattering things, you know, and people won't be happy about it. But because I don't say the things that they want to hear, like let's kill the other side, let's kill them. I just, my thing is that, you know, sometimes having the conversation and trying to decompress the thing might help. In that room, there were Trump people, like solid Trump people. And then there were people who were exacerbated with, and this happens to be a conservative group, so it was Republican. I'm not being partisan here other than that. That's the group it was. And so you had this mix of people. We have to heal ourselves before we heal that. And you know, there's Democrats that are very frustrated too. Matter of fact, the friend that I was telling you about earlier, who's still in, he is probably the last blue dog Democrat ever. I mean, you couldn't swing a ring of Italian sausages on the House floor in Washington, D.C. and hit one. I mean, they're just gone. And so they have this weird problem that they fractionalize, just like our do. We tend to get all the attention, but they have huge fractions in the Democrat Party too. And I think you got to heal yourself and then try to attract. I do think there's a center-left, center-right coalition in America that gets up every day and they get their kids to school, they go to work, they create businesses and jobs. That's where people live, right? Because you can't really afford to be in a business and be on the extremes. It doesn't work very well. You chase people away. And so can you motivate that group to come out and say, okay, I'm done with this part? You know, and the system's designed for this, honestly. It's really, and I'll be very candid with you, I have been fully gotten slapped around by the industrial political complex that is presidential politics. There is a machine that generates money on both sides of the aisle for this. And man, they don't like if you're not singing, dancing to their tune. They just don't like it. My argument is, can you do it by actually going and talking to real people and having the conversation? We're going to find out. Could be a bumpy road.
So Mike, the media likes the divisiveness.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? How they want it to be in conflict.
So what we've decided is we don't do, you know, a lot of national media. Every once in a while I'll go, if they ask me on a serious topic like Iran, not Iran, China, Ukraine, you know, those kind of things where they're looking for a kind of a sober answer, I'm happy to go on. But what we've been doing is, so I've done the Sunday shows, the local Sunday shows in Iowa and New Hampshire. We're talking to local press. We do local radio. So I'm trying to go around the national, you know, come on and say something awful, right? Because that helps. And unfortunately, we're there. I call it affirmation news. You know, they want you to come on and say to their audience that they are, you know, you think that other guy is a rotten dog? Well, I have found a guy that's going to say he's a rotten dog. And that's a sugar high thing I talk about. So we've tried to avoid that, and we're going to try to continue to go around kind of mainstream. We'll go on when we need to, and you know, we've been invited on 2 Sunday shows. I thought it was just a little too early yet. You know that old saying about getting killed in the crib? You know, we thought, well, let's give it a little time. Because again, we're not a declared candidate. I legally need to say that 18 more times apparently, according to my lawyer friend here. But that's the way we're going to do it. And eventually it catches up. By the time, so we'll have to make a declaration if we're going to do this or not, probably by June, I'm guessing. And by the way, I'm just talking to a group of old friends here, right? This is what we're doing here. And so we'll have to try to figure out if that's the right time to make that decision. And candidly, they're already setting up the rules for the first debate to keep candidates like me and others out. They're already doing that. And you know, I saw the rules coming out. So we have to make a determination, can you get around that Or is it just a mountain too high to climb? And do we just continue to try to have this message about we can do better? And these are real solutions, by the way. If you're like a limited government, kind of hopeful, aspirational person, which most of the people I grew up with have those feelings, whatever party they identify with. This is not a message that's crazy. It's not a message that's out of mainstream America. How do we just get mainstream America to say, okay, we're ready for this? That's our trick. And if we're trying to change that narrative, maybe we think this is a way to do it. It's not perfect. We've raised a bit of money, more than I anticipated, for people who are saying, yeah, it's crazy, but here you go, yak away. And it seems to be, for that part, working. We have another round of digital ads that are going to go out here pretty soon. If you get on the website, you'll see it when it comes out. To places like New Hampshire and Iowa, just saying, talking about America and a better place and what we can do. We're going to see.
Do you think the average person remembers even going all the way back to you introducing the Sharing and Protection Act, that you have 20 years nearly of experience with this?
No.
I mean,
They don't.
how do you make folks understand that the passion that you display is rooted with true experience instead of just another voice in the room chirping?
They don't. I think this is the American politics. I think some people do.
They want us to focus on Russia right now, right? The
Yeah.
media?
Yeah, I mean,
I think the true issue is what you're speaking
yeah,
of.
China is the big
China.
strategic, right? And I would argue, and I don't mean to bore you, but Russia is now a client state of China. If China walks away from Russia, they collapse. If they're buying their oil, this debate you see in TV about are they selling weapons, or they are facilitating weapons. Anybody that doesn't believe that, right? Okay. They're saying, the Chinese will say, oh no, we're not doing that. Listen, they're facilitating.
That was just a weather balloon.
Yeah, exactly. Identifies as a weather balloon.
That's great.
That's better than a selfie.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'll put that on there. That's kind of, you guys are my focus group. I hope you know that. I get it. So, I do think Russia is an important thing to get right, and I can tell you why I think they didn't handle this well. But China is the big strategic threat. They continue to move out, and candidly, at the current rate, think of we're under recruiting. Their Navy just surpassed ours. They have these new hypersonic missile systems. They're militarizing space. They're preparing for something worse. And you have to ask ourselves, are we? Our kids can't read. I mean, this is a tragedy. And here's the worst part of this. This is a disability that we can cure. It's a disability for these people. Right? Instead of what they did is they said, we're going to take away work requirements because people aren't qualifying for certain jobs because they can't read. And so they took away work requirements, which I argue you've just robbed that person of their dignity. And I'm not talking about taking a welfare check. That doesn't rob you of your dignity. But saying that you don't have to improve yourself by work or other means, that takes away a person's dignity. And we just marched down this road. Well, I guess we're just going to write off that section of America, right?
Well, Engler used to preach that and made folks earn the unemployment check and earn the government subsidies.
Yeah.
So it's not novel.
No, I mean, we've been trying to do this forever. Remember, Bill Clinton vetoed it, and vetoed it, and vetoed it, and then he signed it and took credit for it. I love that. That was the best political move I ever saw. That guy was a genius. I mean, you think about it, right? And then that was the welfare to work program. And it worked, right? Because you don't want people on welfare. You're permanently sentencing them to poverty. Why would we do that to anyone?
Because they'll vote for you if you give them more money.
There's some of that. I mean, there is a lot of that, actually. And if you don't challenge me, great. If I don't have to work, great, right? I don't care. And then think of this Malay. And I think this, I don't have scientific data for this, but this huge mental health problem that we have created, and then work and dignity of work and self-worth. It's all jumbled up. This happened in this state. It just shocks me. And this, again, I wouldn't. I mean, there's some aspect to the culture wars that needs to be talked about. I think maybe how we talk about it is different. Tolerance is okay, but making everybody else change their point of view is maybe not okay. In this school, we had a friend she had an 8th grader, and I happened to see him the week, it was Labor Day weekend, so he went to school, then they had 4 days off or whatever, and so I happened to see him, and I'm chatting with him, I go, hey, how's 8th grade, are you the big man on campus, all that kind of stuff. Right. And he said, oh my God, it was awful. I go, really, why? He said, well, I'm so embarrassed. And I said, what happened? I thought maybe somebody's bullying him or something. He said, on the first day of class, they made all of us, everyone's sitting like this, each person had to stand up and tell him what his or her pronouns were.
Oh, Jesus.
In 8th grade. And he said, and I said, well, you're kidding me. And he said, no. He said, I was so, and this is a public school, by the way. I was so uncomfortable. Well, he's in 8th grade. Everything is uncomfortable. Why would you do this to an 8th grader? And I said, well, and I thought, well, maybe I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe there was somebody in the class that was different, and they were just trying to show that everybody's okay. Yeah, I gave him the benefit of that. No, everyone had the pronouns that you would expect them to have in the 8th grade. So I thought, why did we do this? Why did you just make 8 or whatever it was, 24 students in the 8th grade outrageously uncomfortable? For what? What have we done? Right? By the way, some of those kids can't read at grade level. My argument is maybe we should have spent that time going back and trying to teach them how to read and do arithmetic. I mean, I've never seen a country that is in crisis, this severe a crisis, who don't seem connected to the problem. We just seem disconnected from the problem. And it worries me a lot, which is why I'm even contemplating doing this. And as I said, in the next 60 days out of the next 100, I will be on the road, all 100, but 60 days I'll be in early states. It's only, can we get a spark? That's really what we're looking for. Can you get that spark? One of the things I will say that would help me, I wish I had known some of the things. I've been in the business world for eight years now. Many of you have dedicated your whole lives to it. And so you know what I'm talking about. And this is kind of that high-tech innovation stuff where one day it's going great and the next day everything's collapsing in on you. I mean, it's just, it's that challenge of trying to make this thing work. And we're still going through some of that with some of the tech company boards I'm on, just trying to get it right in this economy, right? Everything's kind of get upside down. The innovation that happens every day in business, if we don't need to have it all, and government is not business, I get that. But boy, if we could just take that innovation and apply it inside of government, we wouldn't, you wouldn't have to have 10 UAW workers paying for one employee inside of Washington, D.C. You wouldn't need it. There is something like, I'm going to get the number wrong, 15 million unopened tax returns from last year. They haven't even opened them, right? The IRS. I mean, should we be doing it this way? Is this the way we should be doing this, right?
Why are we EFTing the money then? I should have checked on that one.
Yeah, well, think about that, though. And my argument is maybe we need to, apply some technology to this problem. And, State Department, this is another one that drives me crazy. The State Department banned Chinese Lenovo laptops because they were used in Iraq and they were found out that they were beaconing back to China. I don't know who was surprised by this, but okay. 2 weeks ago, the Veterans Affairs, so the State Department banned them, can't have them. Veteran Affairs just approved a contract for Lenovo hardware in the Veterans Affairs Department. And I'm like, does one hand not know what the other hand is doing? They do not. It's being protested by the American companies, as you might imagine. But this just drives me crazy. It just shows you that it's big, it's almost unmanageable. It's like, and when you send $10, you're not getting $10 worth of service. And so I think, gosh, take this technology and bring in business people. Don't bring in career politicals. Not that they're bad, but I mean people business experience. Bring them back to Washington, D.C. and say, help us change this. And by the way, don't go in and say, I'm going to fire everybody. I think that never works. We're going to cut. Okay, great. That doesn't work. Every antibody in the place comes and gets you, right? What if we just said, hey, come in, we're going to make it more efficient. Don't you want to, you're a government worker, don't you want the best for the people you serve? I do, right? So let's have that conversation. Anyway, I think this is absolutely doable, and I think we can get people bought in, even on the left and the right, It's the extremes and how, like you said, how do you bring them together? I think in the primary process, it's not going to happen.
So like, how do you approach the messages that come out? For instance, like right now, the economy, I mean, you know, it's an old, we have a group of people that don't know how to work in an economy that has a supply problem, a supply side problem. And so that issue's gonna have to come up. I mean, I love your message, the problem is, you're gonna have to deal with the issue of the day and periodically in these meetings, or else you're gonna lose a group. How do you do that?
Yeah. And I do talk about the economy.
Okay,
when I normally have a presentation, I do that.
Okay, because there's
yeah.
messages that you're gonna have to approach.
No, exactly. Well, the supply chain is actually hurting us severely. What COVID did, and the shutdown did, is it highlighted how lopsided our supply chain is weighted toward China, and how our policies don't align. So there are some things early on you could do. One is to make ourselves energy independent. That ought to be the standard. If you want to get to a carbon free, you have to make us energy independent. Otherwise, we are at the whim
That's
of.
the most Captain Obvious.
I
mean, how could that not?
I just talked to a guy yesterday, just on that
sorry,
point.
it's
No?
like- It's so
Turn your
Captain
gas
Obvious.
stove off.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I mean,
there
honestly,
are,
at the
you
end
know,
of the day,
the
we're making the rest of the world filthy rich. I mean, even the Saudis stole the PGA from us because we made them rich. You know, I mean, they're paying
true.
Ronaldo 170 million to don their soccer jersey because they have so much money, they have nothing to do with it.
I cannot disagree more.
I don't get it.
Yeah, and look at Russia. We are so dependent on oil, right? And then we have ramped down our. I don't care what they tell you. Matter of fact, I had talked to a guy yesterday who had a lease that was approved, but it needed one more approval process. The party, the Biden team went in. They haven't approved any of them, and they came back and said, "We'll give you $62,000 if you just walk away from your lease because you're not getting it." $62,000. And I said, "Well, what did you do?" And he said, "I took it. They beat me. You can't beat City Hall." So there are a group of people who just fundamentally believe the only way to get to a better environment, honestly. And I listen, I think they're wrong. I don't know if, I just think they're.
The path is like you had described, is the most sensible.
Make us independent, generate jobs and economy and prosperity. We can use some of that prosperity to advance technological advances on energy and energy consumption. Absolutely, we can do it. But you can't do it by just saying we're all, but they do it for the sugar high. 35% of the cars are going to be electric. Okay, the electric grid can't handle it, number one. Number two, guess where 90% of all the processed materials for those electric cars comes from, even domestic cars? China. Right? And China doesn't really want friends or allies, they want customers. So all they want to be able to do is say, when they hit that 35%, we can't keep up, they're going to charge us either A, more for our batteries, so that, guess what China is actually going to export next year? Oh, electric cars. Funny how that works. Right? So they're going to charge U.S. companies more. Right? They won't even hit you in the face. They're smart. And they'll say, yeah, but you can buy these Chinese cars half the price because we do all the processing of all the minerals. The government disapproved 2 lithium mines this year in the United States. One in Minnesota, and I think the other one was either North Carolina or New Mexico, I forget. And they disapproved them. Can't have that going on here. Even though we expect Americans to buy electric cars. You got to have lithium. It's the only way it works. You see what I mean? We are so out of whack. I mean, if we can just get on a plan. Listen, I think, and I'm a big nuclear proponent. And part of the thing I do, by the way, for the economy. So I didn't mean to ignore your question.
It's great. I just.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. And there are some things we can do pretty quickly to actually get at it. And some of the regulatory frameworks need to go away. They're old.
People between the eyes, like Scott said, it's got to be relevant to today.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean.
Food prices.
I get where you're coming from. I'm so into the message, Kate and I already decided that, you should go ahead and announce.
Yeah. That could be the biggest fizzle out ever.
That's not on the microphone, is it? But, yes, you have to, and somehow, some way, and I recognize that government isn't a business, but it is, and you take it all the way down to our level, and unless you can make the decision makers, which are the team members I have in my own company, right? Unless you can deliver a message that's relevant to what's gonna happen today, you don't capture their attention.
Yeah. So I will say, this is not the normal presentation I
No,
would
I'm
give.
sure it's
Yeah.
not.
And what
I'm
I would
just-
do is go down the list of things that we worry about, including border security. You can't get to a smart immigration policy if you don't fix the border problem, right? It's a disaster. And so you can go down this list, and part of it is I talk about the economy too and supply chain, and you can't have, eggs are still $7.99 we paid the other day. Holy mackerel. We can't be whistling past the graveyard about what those costs are doing to real families and their ability to take care of their families. It's taking a huge bite out of them. So I do talk about all of that, and then how you get the economy back going again. Just by saying we're going to make it energy independent, we're going to allow the leases that have already been improved to be drilled. That is a huge economic benefit. And we talk about the inflationary problems are the fact that we spend too much money. It's put a huge burden on interest rates. The reason interest rates are up, this is a scary thought. So our budget last year was $4 trillion. They think within 7 years, roughly, that our interest payment will be $1.2 trillion a year. Interest payment on a $4 trillion budget. You're not sustaining that in your company. You wouldn't make it.
Done.
Yeah, I mean, think about that. That's just the interest payment.
I think if you take the national debt clock and you put it on everybody's dashboard on their heads up in their car, quite frankly, it might wake them up.
They're walking around with drinking the Kool-Aid.
I send that to as many people who will listen.
The only problem is that number looks so big. How do you even wrap your head around it? You're like, oh, that's got to be somebody else's problem. I've never seen that many.
I think by the individual
What's
debt
that?
that each American holds, 40,000.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Enough to wake
I
you
would
up.
just suggest to you, if you're gonna do this, because I agree with what you're saying and the way you've set this up, it will take a Reagan-esque communication style to do this. Because Reagan wasn't just his ideas, it was the way he communicated, it was his tone, it was his demeanor, it was his humor. Because I'm afraid things are not broke enough to wake up a lot of people.
Yeah,
We
you may
have
be right.
Yeah.
We have
How
to,
do we
we can
gonna
sit and
fall?
talk about the debt, which we've all heard, and I think people are somewhat deaf to that. We can talk about all the unfunded obligations with Social Security and Medicare, we can talk about it at the state level, states have the same problem. It's overwhelming, and people don't know what to do. It's going to take we've got to wake up, not us, but a chunk of this country, my kids included, to realize that this is a problem. And it's gonna take, I think, as much the style of how it's communicated as what is communicated.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I don't disagree.
My mother told me, and I'm sure she told you, it was not what I said, it was how I said it.
Yes.
That made a difference. And I think that's gonna be important, because we've got to engage these people who are otherwise not at the age of it.
Yeah, and that number, most people have a hard time managing their household finances. And so when you talk about $31 trillion, they're like, I can't, I'm trying to make my credit card payment this month to avoid the 23% interest that's on there, right?
And some of that has to be put in context for people, because if you add up the national debt, but what's worse than that is all the unfunded obligations of Social Security and Medicare, and you look at it at the state level, and people talk about raising taxes and billionaire taxes. And what I've said to people, they said, we'll leave everybody's taxes alone, but let's confiscate the wealth of every human being in this country. Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, you, me, the waiter, waitress at the restaurant, it's about $140 trillion. It ain't enough to plug the gap on Social Security and all the unfunded obligations and the debt and so forth. It's a huge problem that's got to be put into perspective for people to understand how bad that is.
Yeah, I almost think you got to hit them home first, because I don't know, how do you have that conversation about how big this financial and fiscal problem is?
Some big numbers.
Oh
More
my
than
gosh.
just that.
Yeah.
How about, I'm not from the government and I'm here to help.
I like it. Listen, I do think, I always believe politics, you're supposed to get in and get out and get in and get out, go back and forth. That's the way our founding fathers did it. And I do think there's value of being out and, getting a few bruised knuckles on a business deal and all of the things that happen. I just think it's important versus this political track that,
You're a trusted soul around here.
well, thank
I
you.
drive down Brighton road and I see the house on the hill, the modular home, I remember you and I talking about that.
Yep.
And you were my first, so you're a trusted soldier. I pray that you can get the message down the pipeline, because just like everyone's saying, until we fall, they are towing back.
Well, we all thought we fell. We thought we fell in 2008. We thought when are they going to, you made a great point about the communication. Reagan said it well. Trump did not. He made some good business decisions, which is why I think he was elected in 2016. People said, you know what, I don't want a swamp politician. Let's
Right.
bring a businessman in.
I think that's right.
And he did some good things, and he didn't do but he didn't do terrible for the country, but he can't shut his mouth.
Yeah. His
Oh my
demeanor was-
gosh.
So I've been saying on the
He
trail,
made us energy independent. He
all
did
of the
good
policy and none of the tweet.
things. Yeah, just shut up.
So that's behind the closed
So
doors.
put that bumper sticker on there.
Behind closed doors,
If
that's how
any
it
of
works,
us
huh?
can do any one thing, each of us has to talk to somebody. We convince one person at our office, we just have to, and it's like the Fabergé commercial, and so on and so on. That's our only way.
Was
is
it
one
Fabergé
kid.
or was it Johnson & Johnson?
I think it was Fabergé.
Okay,
you know.
I blame Johnson & Johnson for that, because I can still remember that commercial.
Yeah.
You
It's
tell
gonna be in
two
your head
people,
all
and they
day,
tell two
so
people.
on.
So you're gonna be gone 60% of the time in the next 100 days. What's your ask of us? How do we help you in that interim? What do you need from us?
You know, really, one of the things too is I've already picked up some good ideas about just talking to you and what that's what's going to help, and just talk it up. Tell people to go to leadamerica.org, check it out. Maybe there's a better way to do this. That's what's going to be helpful on this. If you want to, leave some of the change that's in the back of your couch on there, that would be great too. I'll put it to good use, I promise. But having these conversations helps, because you can say things that are dumb with your friends that you can't say on the campaign trail. And if you have a good idea, honestly, I mean, so one of the things I'll tell you, this is great on the doctor thing. I had this call for public service, and military's going great, sure, but reading corps I think is going to be incredibly important. That if we can reclaim our reading corps, we can solve a lot of our problems. Believe it. And the guy came up to me and said, I'm a doctor, and he said, you should add a doctor corps in there, because doctors coming out with a lot of debt, they don't want to do it, can't get nurses. Brilliant, right? So you have a good idea. I will absolutely take it and put it out there, because that's what this to me is all about. I don't think I'm the smartest guy in the room. I just think, if we can package it right, to your point, we can make some traction.
Well, that guy in the black hat does a podcast with us. Can we get you on a podcast?
I'd be honored to do it.
He is filming right now.
Uh-oh.
Is it good? Is that okay?
Well, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, let us take a look at it.
One thing real quick, so I went to a roundtable last fall before the November election, and it was for business owners. It was probably the most disappointing 2 hours of my life, because every single politician that came in there talked about national problems that I, as a business owner, cannot solve.
Right.
So you have a significant amount of influence in Livingston County in this room right now. So what is one thing that we can do to help influence this particular message through our employees, through our communities? Because we need to have actionable things that we can help with, and a lot of times we just don't know what that direction is. I can talk about China and foreign policy in Ukraine, but there's not a hell of a lot I can do about it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
You can promote on your social networks if you find the right message that you think identifies, and that's where you can find some of this on Lead America. Share that on your social networks, right? So everybody in here is influential in their world. Whatever, I don't care if it's 2 people or 100 people, and that's really the power of the Fabergé commercial, right? It's just 2 people tell 2 people tell 2 people. So if you find something that works on there, I did an example. I did an op-ed. Michigan's talking about doing away with you have to read by the 3rd grade or you can't get promoted. They're talking about doing away with it, right? So I always find that lowering your standards when you have a hard problem is a good idea, right? That's what you all do, right? Yeah, exactly. So I did a piece on it. My argument is, if people know that they're trying to do this, right? Like, you want your kids not being educated from 4th to 12th grade? I mean, really? Spend a lot of money on these kids, And it's, by the way, it's not the teacher's problem. It's big. This is important to me. My father was a teacher. My wife's mom, my mother-in-law was a teacher.
Society where we pay our educators and
Yeah.
who take care of our elderly.
And we're blaming them. Like, so a kid shows up in the 9th grade, he's reading at the 4th grade level. Tell me what he's going to learn in the
It's
9th
Mrs.
grade.
Smith's problem. Yeah.
And now we beat on the teachers. Oh, you guys are terrible. No, probably not. It's the system that allows this to happen. That's the problem. And we ought to get after that.
But, you know, I'm gonna tell this real quick, it's a motivation. My daughter worked at Star Commonwealth for a while, and, you know, kids are adjudicated there, and they're typically low-level offenders. And the most interesting thing was the kids who were getting close to 18, wanting to learn to read, because they wanted to not have somebody read to them the driver's test so they could get their license. They wanted to read well enough so they didn't have to have somebody, because that was embarrassing, and they were motivated to learn to read. They could not read because, you know, they came from urban environments, and they just didn't have schools, many of them dropped out, and they wanted, that was the motivation.
Being called out publicly.
Be motivation.
You get Mama Bear on the case. We're going to get this thing done. I had a Mama Bear for 5 boys, and
How do you
she.
break the cycle, though? I was in the legislature when we passed the 3rd grade reading.
Yeah, did you see they're trying to undo it?
Yes, so we passed the law that says you have to read at grade level before you're going to be passed. So now it goes into effect. Well, they're not reading at grade level any better than they were before, so we have kind of a change in the legislature. So they say, well, let's just roll that back. That didn't work. How do you, when a lot of the parents can't read? I mean, they are,
I just said that to Kate.
Yeah.
that's the problem. And
The
so how do you
numbers
break
on adult literacy are pretty horrific.
They're horrible, and their kids aren't any better. In fact, they're worse. And so government passes a law that says you have to read or we're not gonna pass you. So when it goes into effect, they can't read, so they say, well, let's get rid of the law.
Yeah.
Well, and along those lines, when they changed the GED, because we were doing GED
Yeah,
rather
that's
than
right.
high school completion. I challenge anybody in the room to try to take the GED right now and see if you could pass.
Really? Pretty hard?
It's, I mean, and that change came in place, gosh, probably 10, 15 years ago, and it's very difficult. So then that makes now, how are you gonna get your education? Do you think people who are in their 25, 30 plus are gonna wanna go sit in the classroom to do the GED prep so that they can actually get the skills to pass theirs?
Yeah. No, I do think, I mean, I'm a big carrot and a stick kind of person on reading. So the stick part would be, hey, if you're engaged in law enforcement, guess what? You got a problem. You know, one of the ways you get around it. The carrot part, I think we have to do a better job, and we do have to get parents more involved in this. This was terrifying, but I spoke at an economic club in Detroit, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago. And they had brought their highest performing students to sit at the thing, and I thought, I don't want to sit up there. Can I sit with the students? I just wanted to see who they were and talk to them a little bit. And there was a teacher there, had been there for like 25 years, who looked pretty worn down, not gonna lie to you. And I said, what's your biggest problem in the classroom now? And he said, you see these kids? He said, these are my highest performers. Half of them did not know where their parents were last night. What? Well, that means they had to come home, feed themselves, do their homework, get ready for bed, go to bed, get up the next morning. Maybe they got breakfast, maybe they didn't, and show up to school. And these folks were fighting through it. Obviously, these were if these are kids that are like, I'm gonna do that. I'm not gonna be like that. How many kids don't do that? Right. So that's a whole nother set of problems we have to do. But I think we have institutionalized poverty in this country, and we have just kind of whistled past the graveyard. Like, oh, it's too hard, so let's not do it. We'll give them a check every month and hope for the best. And it's not working. And of course, you got a drug problem in America that's getting worse and worse.
Hey, Mike, I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I'm Roger Deaton, I'm one of the county commissioners here.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, sir. I worked on your campaign early 2000s, but at that time, my 9-month-old was now in college.
Oh my, don't tell us that. Oh.
You remember Dana Fortenberry?
Yes.
Yeah, I worked with her and everything. But,
oh, that's wonderful.
I want to know who was involved in the last election, right? How'd you get involved? My wife and I threw everything on the line, and we got involved. And we supported probably 12 candidates in our area. And we laid it all on the line, and we won pretty good. We got a lot of new people in the school boards, and that's where it starts. You know, who shows up at the school board meetings? Who's showing up at the county commissioner meetings? You know, are we gonna be able to take the sabers out and go attack Russia? You know, I worked in Russia, I worked in China, I worked in the automotive industry. They're coming after what we have, and I told everybody this 25 years ago, they have no respect for any intellectual property rights. And I came back to the small towns and I looked at our schools and I said, hey, you guys, I really appreciate you putting a bond through to put a wrestling gym in, and I'm a big jock, but I walked into our chemistry rooms and these things are atrocious. And that was over 20 years ago. So I was that guy a long time ago saying, hey, I just came out of a factory in China and those kids on the dirt floor, they want what our kids have. We better get our shit together. And so now here we are in Livingston County, and we're fighting again. So we did pretty good this last round. We got a lot of, I mean, I'm conservative. I don't know where everybody else is in this room, but you know, I'm a business owner as well, and I think, you know, you need to buck up and start helping your local candidates and really get involved there. We obviously got to help, you know, Mike Rogers as well, but I think locally we can't lose Livingston County. You know, for the first time, we've got, you know, a liberal representing my area, Genoa, and that was tough. You know, because I think our values, I don't think, you know, hit on the same level. So you all need to look at, you know, your school boards. This is where the, you know, the reading is taking place. You know, my wife put it all on the line and helped so many candidates. It affected her business big time, but I think it's a win down the road. So I think about it that way. Okay?
You know, one thing about China, and I tell this to groups, is that they made a pact with the Chinese Communist Party. Basically said, I will give you some prosperity, but I get to control your life, right? They have complete control of every citizen in China. Where we did it and it worked. They took 650 million people out of poverty in China. Now they did it at our expense, a lot of it. Intellectual property theft it's unprecedented transfer of wealth in world history, and it's because they stole it. That's a whole nother topic. We said, in America, we have something really unique here. We're gonna give you liberty and we're gonna give you freedom. And then you have to make your own prosperity. But we believe that the combination of those will allow people to, you know, benefit from the sweat of their brow. And it was an unprecedented, and there's been no other nation in the world like this. And somehow we are getting a little hazy on that relationship. And there are the people that you talk about who think government should be a little bit more involved in your life. It'll get a little better. You know, I think if we have conversations where people start to realize it's not worth the exchange. I might get a bigger welfare check every month, but is it really worth the you know, what I have to give up to get that? I argue probably not. And so I think there's a way to inspire people to this new cause of you know, embracing that liberty and that freedom, and the fact that you can I don't care who you are, you can start your own business tomorrow if you want, or you can work hard and be a manager of a McDonald's if you want. I mean, it's fantastic. Well, you don't get this anywhere. I was talking to a guy it was a pretty nice hotel, it was like a Four Seasons, and he said, you know, I don't know why and he was from Africa. He was a legal immigrant from Africa, and he was saying, you know, if at home, I would have to pay to have this job. I'd have to know somebody to pay them to get this job, number one. And he said, then I'd have to pay like a VIG every month to keep this job. And he said, I came here, I kept waiting. He said, I just told them I'll work 7 days a week, I'll do whatever I need this job for my family. And he said, nobody stuck their hand out, nobody harassed me. He said, now I get to work as much as I want. And he said, after 10 years, I am buying a house, right? I mean, to me, that is who we are. Right? And we forget that these folks have a very different culture and norm about what it means to have the opportunity to succeed in a country.
Does he need a realtor?
See, this is why I love America, right here.
That goes on the podcast.
The balloon? Yeah. So it's clearly a collection platform. And so how this would work, I'll give you the boring technical side, but you can be the smartest person at the water cooler. There is a suite of technology that goes on any collection platform the U.S. has. So think of a satellite that goes way up there. They're big and they're expensive. They're about the size of a bus. And you launch them and they stay up there for 50 years. And they have certain bits of technology on there that collect certain things, including, by the way, they call it MASENT. They can detect certain anomalies in the chemical makeup of a certain area and figure out, oh, that's where they've got a chemical weapon, or that's where they have a nuclear weapon, or it's really phenomenal, the technology. And I'm always saying, good for Team America. Then they come down a little bit, and the low Earth orbit ones, right? And they have collection platforms, but now commercial entities also have platforms on there. You can get on and see Google Earth. You can, right, all that kind of stuff. Our satellites can bump around. You can do a financial transaction and have the transaction go from the United States to London and never touch anything on the ground. It bumps up, goes down. So it's harder to intercept it. So there's just so much that we can do. Those are all collection platforms. Imagine pictures, what I told you about chemical detection, other things. So they're going to mount something on this at 60,000 feet, and it tells me that they wanted to suck up every communication we had. I don't care if it's you talking to me on my phone, or it's a military police officer at the front gate calling back to his unit on a radio. All of those frequencies mean something, right? And if I'm trying to figure out, how would I ever penetrate this base? Or how do they operate in the case of emergency? How do they scramble jets, right? All of this is really important information. They call it order of battle, right? Doesn't mean that they're going to attack tomorrow, but what it means is they want to be able to be prepared to attack tomorrow. They want. And so having that thing drift over the continental United States, I know they were jamming it, but you can't jam anything 100% at any point in time. You're going to miss, right? And it takes, at 60,000 feet, the time it would take to send a burst signal to a satellite is, it's less than a second, right? So if you're missing that thing for less than a second, they get all that data, they can put it in a packet and shove it up at a satellite. So it was clearly designed for that. And it's funny, it started in Guam. And then we have lots of military presence. Over Hawaii, lots of Navy presence. Over to Alaska, a lot of forward deployed radar for missiles and other things, lots of presence. And then down through the continental United States, where we had nuclear bases and other sensitive, and it just flew the whole way over. And I'm sure the weather was important to them. Don't get me wrong, but it was clearly a collection platform. And when the confirmation for me is when you saw the pictures of them hauling the balloon, what was left of it, out of the water. All of that metal is basically a giant antenna, right? So you get as much of those signals as you can possibly suck up. The real trick is, did they get any of the suite of technology to know exactly what they were doing? But I wouldn't have let it hover that long. When it hit Guam, I would have taken that out of the sky. It's just too valuable, the places it went to. So it wasn't just here. It was, Hawaii is a pretty important naval base if you're, looking at Chinese conflict in the South Asia Sea, or South China Sea. Pretty important. So very close.
We're in this great power competition with China.
Yeah.
And I think, kind of building off your question a little bit, hypersonics, GPS, 365 ship Navy, these are things that I think it's helpful for us to be educated on, but it's not something that we can materially do. It's not like we can walk out of the room, there's not a lot of action that we can take on those things.
Right, very true.
Is there some things that we can do in the great competition with China here?
Absolutely.
Convincing people to take off ByteDance, TikTok from their phones, is it?
Yes, all of the things. And so here's how I would normally do this presentation. Talk about the threat of China, what they're doing, all the things that they're doing. And then I talk about, do you think we are ready to compete with the old Soviet Union with money? Right? So I think you have to understand, I always think America performs better if we know we're challenged. Right? Think it's since the 90s, have we really, even the war on terror is awful, terrible, but it wasn't an existential threat to the United States. The Soviet Union was an existential threat to the United States. Remember getting under the desks? Right? It got it into our psyches, like, hey, this is real, right? So I think, and I argue that China is an existential threat, or could be, right? Now, we don't have to be in conflict. Don't think that I think that's the only way to solve this. I don't. But we better be prepared for it. And that's where I think America comes in. Then I turn it and talk about, here's the things that we need to do to get ready for this. We have to start teaching our kids to read. Everyone in this room can participate in that. Matter of fact, if you had a hankering about being a tutor for some of these kids, Beyond Basics is always looking for tutors. And by the way, they pay you for the time because they need you to show up. It's really important, even though it's a not-for-profit. Things like that. And how do you advocate for energy independence, how you have that conversation. So what we need to do is stop having the green folks on one end of the room and the energy folks on the other end of the room, and nobody's talking to each other is a disaster. And we're seeing that play out in real time. And talking about, educating people on supply chain. Like, did you realize that it's over 80% of all the basic things for pharmaceuticals, like not the secret sauce that they add on, but all the basic compounds, guess where they come from? China, right? So you start realizing how dependent we are on a nation that we know wants to take our legs out from under us. You go, that's a problem. No, we're going to have to do something about that. We can do that domestically. We need to get ready. I would talk about spending and government spending. And the fact that the government's spending so much time in the new business or regulation, is that making it easier to be prosperous in America or harder? I think it's a simple question. If it makes it easier, I'll probably be for it. If it makes it harder, I'm going to be against it. And I think a lot of what they do, it makes it harder. So I would focus on those things. I think the number one thing, candidly, if I could be king for a day, to say every American needs to do this for the next 5 years, I would say let's eliminate illiteracy in America. We did it before. We did it at the turn of the century, right? I don't think people really understand how much problem this causes the United States of America. Again, they were building, I think it was Virginia, was going through and doing calculations about who could read at the 4th grade level and projecting their prison populations based on that and how many prisons to build. What? That seems like the wrong end of that approach, right? I want to intercede a long time before that person decides they want to commit a crime, go to jail. To me, this is the biggest thing that we can do, and we can all do it, and solve this huge problem and add to our economy.
Don't you think the education problem maybe starts like, I don't know, at least here in Michigan, like in Lansing or something, like, I feel like it's not like a mystery what's wrong with education, like we're still teaching kids the same way we have been for so long, and kids don't learn the same way. And so I've never understood, especially as a mother of a young boy when he was going through school, was very much different than my daughter, and wasn't comfortable sitting at a desk all day long to learn. I don't understand why they're still doing that. And while I think it's great, this program that you have set up to help the kids who already can't learn, it seems to me like we need to go back and say, let's make it different. Let's fix the problem so we don't end up with kids who can't read. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. But here's what they'll tell you. They're going to say, listen, I have 100 kids in my school, whatever. You want me to make it right for 60 kids. I have these other 40 kids that you're going to dump on me, and I have nothing to do with it. They're going to be trouble. They're going to give me, they're not learning. So I'm going to create the whole system to the 40 kids. And we've been doing this for 30 or 40 years, and we're paying a price for it. Right?
It doesn't work.
No, it does not work, and you don't challenge anyone. Now they're talking about doing away with AP classes because that hurts people's feelings. My argument is, guess what? The Chinese don't care if your feelings are hurt or not. They're coming to take what you have. What are we going to do? That's why I think if we talk about literacy, we start challenging the system. I just came out of Grand Rapids. They have a really cool program, to your point, and it's through a museum, so it's not even through a school. They were going to create a charter school around it, and it's project-based. They do project-based learning for these kids, and they're having huge success with this thing. Their first graduating class, I want to say, was last year. This is their second graduating class coming up, and they're having huge success. The kids are really reacting to it to well, right? And that's not going to be for every kid. Some kids are going to need to sit in a classroom and go through the thing. But some kids can do that. Now we just have to be careful. You can't give everything to everybody. So my theory always been is meritocracy is always probably the better way to do just about anything. You'll always get the best results, best performers do well. They go to AP classes, I used to walk by the AP classes and look in with envy. Team, hey, can I get you a coffee? Anything in there? Smart kids, damn it.
There are a lot of project-based schools out there,
Yeah.
and charter schools that are doing very well and making huge gains. We actually have a charter school, and it's a very small one, but we don't get paid the same. The state aid's different, and there's actually some pretty significant cuts that they're looking at giving up a 20% cut.
Yeah, well, and again, that's
And
because,
so that's part of the problem.
yeah, it is part of the
I mean, 'cause
problem.
there are a lot of highly successful, if you look in Livingston County where, we don't have those kind of kids.
Yeah, right.
There's now, I think, we talked about this in our board, there's 8 or 10 charter schools now.
Listen, I think that the money should follow the student. I call it the
I don't
backpack.
know why it doesn't. Drives me nuts.
Well, because the institutions of, listen, the teachers union started here in Michigan, across the country, right? The MEA was the first in the country that organized teachers, and it's a problem. They don't.
Northwest Airlines.
And you know what? And I get it. And again, I'm not. My dad was a teacher, right? He was a shop teacher, which I don't. You can't even say shop anymore without like somebody running you out of the place, right? You can't teach shop. I just think that you have to raise the conversation. And I think we can do it around literacy because it's pretty hard to find somebody that doesn't think you should have to read at grade level in high school. Who believes that?
The parents. My oldest teaches 8th grade for 4 years now. So excited when he graduated. I'm going to change lives, history and government, yay. He's already beaten down. He said in his classroom, he can first of all tell you who's going to prison and who's not, just by looking at them,
I've
which
heard
is
this before
sad.
by teachers, yeah.
But he said that about 80% of his kids are just sitting there and they're floating through and they won't cause a problem and they don't care. He said 15% are complete idiots that are causing trouble, and 5% truly are engaged. He said, I said, what about the parents? He said, 1% are good, the rest of them couldn't care less.
Yeah.
He's already found that out in 4 years, when he wanted to teach. And they don't pay, he likes teaching, so he's staying. But it's not a good place, we gotta pay our teachers, to his point earlier, the real teachers, the good teachers, because you get stuck. Well, something you said earlier about why do they ask pronouns? He's been to several seminars before school started each year. We're gonna get sued, you gotta make sure you use the right pronoun, get the right pronoun. So the school is pushing, the administration is pushing to the kids, to the teachers, we're gonna get sued. So he just calls everybody by their last name, because that way he doesn't have to be worried about pronouns. But that's why they're pushing the pronouns early on, because they're afraid to get sued.
We just kind of, if we raise, I don't know. We have to raise the conversation, I think.
Agreed.
And what I would do as well is I'm going to bet that a lot of those kids that are having those problems where the parents don't care, be interesting to see how much government subsistence is paid to those parents. And my thing is, if you want to get, this would not be popular, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you want to get a check from the government, and listen, I think welfare we should have a safety net for people who are on tough times. We have the ability to do it, we should do it. But it's never meant to be a long-term thing.
It's a bridge.
It's supposed to be a bridge. Yeah, it's not a career path. I like that. But I would say, listen, by the way, part of your requirement, matter of fact, you don't even have to work right away, but you do have to learn how to read. I'm going to bet there's think about that number. 70% will end up on welfare. So the percentage of welfare is going to be higher than 70% that can't read at grade level. And you can fundamentally change their life by getting them to read at grade level. I know this sounds simple, but I think, we try to solve everything all at the same time. We can't quite get it done. We're pulling out our hair. People are fighting for charter schools. I remember the first charter school. I think you were part of that too with Don and Alice. Wyland, thank you very much. Yeah, on the LCC, right? And that was designed to get kids, interested in shop. Again, I guess that's politically incorrect. Industrial arts, trades. Well, and it worked. It worked. Now I know it's been on its third rendition, but this is the one thing we know will work. It will have an impact immediately, and it'll impact the costs for us to handle these people. So I know it's not huge, it's not going to solve every problem, but if you could get America bought into this, think of the movement we could do. right? Where people are going, yeah, education is important. Oh, by the way, they can't do math either. Okay, well, let's deal with this. Then let's get at math. It still shocks me that some 50 schools, and by the way, Baltimore had the same problem. They didn't have one student. One. We're going to pay for those students the rest of our lives because they're going to either be in jail or on welfare, and we're all paying for it. Right? We have to break this cycle. We have to break this cycle.
How can we? When I was in the legislature, I was interviewed by the MEA. Said that I think it's not only the MEA, but every educational group has their organization or union now. And I was asked by them, why do Republicans hate teachers? When I was in their interview for the thing, I said, well, I don't think Republicans do. And they said, well, yes, you do. And I said, well, I don't think Republicans necessarily hate, and I'm not trying to be political. You can be liberal, Democrat. But I said, ever since I've been in the legislature, every year, all you say is you need more money. Every year, we've appropriated more money. Every year, there's been fewer students. And every year, every metric that you use to measure education goes down. You tell me, what's the solution? How can we help you besides just giving you money? Obviously, pouring money on that problem doesn't help. So,
What was their response?
None.
Yeah.
None. They said you've really ruined all of our lives because you've changed the retirement system so that we have to go to a 401k, a modified part retirement, part 401k, which wasn't true, but that was what happened. All the new teachers were having to
Instead
go
of a
to
pension, they got
yes,
a
instead of a
403B or
pension.
whatever.
So what if we did this? What if we said, if we're going to be with you. Yeah, you guys can leave. By the way, don't worry about it. We've kept you way over this thing, but let's say we say literacy is. We know we have a literacy problem. It's a crisis. It's a disability, and we can fix it. What if we align all our policies around reading and for teachers, like everything, including welfare or government assistance? You take a test. If you're not at grade level, that's okay. We're going to help you. We're going to get you to read at grade level. Same with teachers. You produce kids that can read at your grade level, we're going to give you a bonus. So the federal government spends a ton of money on education. My argument is, obviously, it's not working.
Yeah, and it's not,
why don't we
just
say pay bonuses to teachers?
Yeah,
I'm for that.
Yeah, I think teachers do get burnt out, but none of them go into teaching that don't want to teach.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take long for them to.
Well, look at was it your son?
Yeah, he's all right. He's still going to do it because
He likes it, but you know what? He sees that light on that one student. So my niece is a teacher. Bill's daughter's a teacher, and she talks about seeing the light. Right, that's what fires him up about knowing they made a difference in that kid's
The kids that do
life.
well are brilliant to come out. It's just that percentage gets smaller and smaller and smaller all the time.
Yeah.
But they are brilliant. They're good. The outstanding students. They are good, and I'm sure they keep the teachers going. Stuff.
I know you want to shut us down, but one quick question.
I never shut you down.
Do you have any, or you need to go
Nobody
somewhere.
puts baby in a corner. Oh, does that date me? Does that date me?
That's
for that
why
one?
I'm in the middle. That's why I sat in the middle. Do you have any thoughts
that
on what's
one
going to
too.
happen with Line 5? The DTE guy just left, but do you have any idea here in
Thank
Michigan what our government's going to do with Line 5?
I don't. I haven't really tracked it well. Sorry.
That's all right. I just ask everybody.
No, that's good to do. Well, listen, we're going to have a serious modernization of our electric grid across the country. We are outrageously vulnerable, number one. And number two, we're adding things to it without improving it. And so, again, this is where policy doesn't line up. I'm an environmental greenist. Don't do anything to put lines up or improve the electric grid. Well, that doesn't work.
Right.
I want everyone driving an electric car, but I don't want to improve the electric grid. Well, that doesn't work.
Instead of moving gas in a pipeline buried under the ground, let's drive trucks back and forth across the bridge to bring propane to the people in the
Yeah,
EV.
well,
It's just-
we need to stop saying, they're going to ban gas stoves. I mean, did you see this?
I just bought a new one quick.
This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Again, our politics
But
have
it's
gotten
backed
so
by
small.
China.
Our
That's
grid
backed
is
by
dependent
China.
upon fossil
Oh, yeah, I'm sure
fuels.
China
They want
loves
us
it.
to be using electricity, so that we're more.
And they're building coal-fired plants. Like, I think they're going to have 60 in the last 2 years. 60 coal-fired plants. And they're going to get after you for your high-efficient, modern automobile. Anyway, don't get me
So
started.
you talked about the nuclear you support, which I agree. I can't imagine why we're abandoning such a program. Do you think that resonates? Do you think people will?
No.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Yeah, because I don't see people saying, "Whoa, let's go back to nuclear," because everybody thinks there's something.
3 Mile Island.
Yeah.
So here's my way around it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm boring y'all to death here. There are 2 military bases, and I spent a lot of time figuring this out. So I don't know if you're familiar with modular nuclear generators. They're smaller, easier to contain, less waste, really high efficiency, 0 emissions, right? So if you're for no carbon, the steam is about the worst thing you deal with, steam, literally. There's 2 military bases where we could put these and take those bases off the electric grid, and that's 2 good reasons happen for that. One, it makes that base a lot less vulnerable to external shenanigans on electricity, right? Number 1. And then number 2, it completely makes that base far more efficient and cost effective. And so there's 2 bases. They happen to both be Air Force bases. I'm working with a retired 4-star Air Force guy. And despite him being in the Air Force, he's a pretty good guy, as I tease him. This is the way I would do it. I would start there because there's no permitting process. You don't have to worry about 8 years of people pushing back. Put them in the ground, and they can contain them, by the way, in a way that if anything happens, you just seal it up and there it goes, right? I mean, there's lots of safety and precautions, and these aren't 3 Mile Island nuclear facilities anymore. I would do that, and I would show the world and the United States, this works. I mean, imagine if you didn't have to do it everywhere. Just do it in places where it doesn't mean that there's a nuclear plant on every corner in America. It doesn't have to be that way. But huge cities that are having pollution problems, like Los Angeles, let's throw one out there. Give yourself a modular nuclear thing. Think of the energy effectiveness and carbon emission that you could take off the grid, right? So not everybody needs one. We wouldn't need one here in Brighton. We can use the way we have it. But some of these bigger cities are going to need ways to get off the grid. That's a perfect way to do it. So no, it doesn't. Doesn't have big political sale. People don't jump up and down and cheer and go, "Ooh, can't wait." But what you can do is say, you want a real solution? Here's a real solution. We're going to put them in, we're going to test them. We could have it done within 3 years, humming along, take the base off of using, carbon producing electricity that's produced somewhere else that has the ability to be sabotaged. I don't know, I like it. And then I'd continue to roll it through either military bases or whatever. And some of that power, by the way, you could push back to the grid. That's the cool part. You could actually start pushing some back off the base into the local community and cut utility rates, which, if you're a big manufacturing hub and center, I'd want one of these nearby. Cut my rates. Make my products more effective, more cost effective against, say, a Chinese product that they stole from us anyway. Oh, did I say that?
Yeah.
Is that not my inside voice? I'm sorry.
How important is the Latino vote?
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much. Hey, appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you. I know we're getting close. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say, how important is the Latino vote when you're being advised by the people that are orbiting you?
Yeah.
When you started with that story about the Uber driver who just, quite frankly, at the ground level is so thankful.
Yeah.
It seems to me that the Latinos right now, the trades, they're so thankful for everything that they have right now. How important are we reaching them? Because
we're seeing this.
They're Catholics. They're hard workers.
Yeah,
they want to
pro-family. They're a lot big on that. Yes, we're going to have to spend more time talking to them on issues that matter, and those are the family issues. You know which issue is really important to them? Education.
Exactly.
And they get it. And so when they have this, these are tend to be strong Catholics or faith-based people. They get in and they're telling their kids they need to think this way about issues that they may disagree with. That's why they've been drifting away from the Democrat Party, number one. And number two, they want their kids to come out and be able to compete in the American dream. And they know the one way they can do that is education. And so that's why I think this notion of, hey, let's get on this one problem, let's solve a disability in America that we can cure, And let's give all these people opportunity to prosper in this country. I don't care where you come from, education's important. It's the great equalizer in this country. I think that works. We're going to find out.
I like what you're saying.
And my Spanish is terrible.
So is mine. But that's all right, because you can press